Hi everyone, I'm Monica Bullington from Remax Rising, and today we are doing the first of two parts of a buyer consultation. Now, I will say I usually do these in person. It does usually involve a lot of me talking at people, so we might as well do it this way. So there's a couple things I want to point out. So I'm recording this on March 20th. 2020. So everything I'm going to tell you is going to be relevant to McLean County specifically, but also right now. So every year our contracts change a little bit, and there's some nuances to make note of. So this is relevant right now. And if you have further, questions, obviously we want to have that conversation. McLean County does we buy and sell houses differently than pretty much everywhere else. So if you have seen information on the internet or like house hunters or anything like that from different parts of the world and how their inspections are handled and all those words and stuff, they may not be relevant to buying or selling a house here. So I always caution people, let me pretend like you don't know anything. It's not to think, that you are stupid or anything, but it helps me make sure that I've covered all my bases and that you know exactly how things are handled here in McLean County. Okay? All right, so hope you have a glass of wine or coffee or a beer or whatever. Press pause if you need to go do that. So in the first part of this two-part series, we're going to talk more about the process and who's involved. And then the second part of the series will actually dive into our current real estate contract. And the reason I do that is it's super helpful to actually see the document in front of you so I can actually point it out. It makes it much less scary when it's time to go actually write an offer because you've already seen the paperwork that we're going to use. Okay, so what you have in front of you is this is my typical brochure, so it's usually a trifold. But since I decided to do this, we're going to use this the way it is. So this is what I usually use give to people when I do buyer consultations. So the inside is really what I want to focus on here. So we're going to start with the people that are involved in a transaction. Okay. So put my face over there. Perfect. So the people that are going to be involved, obviously, a realtor. So as your realtor, I can help you buy any house you want. A lot of people get confused because they see a yard sign in front of a house and they think, oh, I want that house. I should call that real estate agent. And the problem with that is the person whose name is in that yard represents that seller. So that is the last person you want to call to work with because they're already representing the seller. Okay. So you want somebody who does not care about what house you buy, in the sense that, I don't have ulterior motives and I don't want you to buy my listings. Okay. I want to find the best house for you, regardless of what it means for me. And that's the realtor code of ethics. And that's what we hold ourselves accountable to, is making sure we are doing what's best for our client. So as a buyer, you can work with any agent and we can help you buy any house. We can even help you work with for sale by owners in most cases. So if you do see those properties online, still reach out to a realtor. And obviously you want to work with one realtor because that makes the whole process a little bit easier if you have one person involved, because at the end of the day, only one person is going to really be able to work with you. And the great thing about working with a realtor as a buyer is you don't have to pay us in most situations. I say most because sometimes for sale by owners won't agree to work with realtors and pay us, but for the most part, sellers are paying the realtors. Sellers pay out of the equity in their home, both the buyer and the seller realtor commissions. So what that means for you is it's essentially free. The cost of working with us is already built into the home. And it's also an important distinction when we're talking about what you're looking for in a house. we're also talking about your expected time frame you're going to live in that house. Because if you're going to live in that house for 2 years versus 10 years, we need to approach that situation differently, because if you're going to, your plan's only going to live here for 2 or 3 years and you're only going to put, 3% or 5% down in a down payment. Well, what that means for future you is when you need to go sell, you're going to probably be behind in your equity. So although you're not required to put 20% down or anything like that, like you used to, you do want to have that conversation with your realtor about what future you needs to do to get out of the house, okay? Because we want to make sure that you can afford the house when you're in it, but we also want to know that you can get out of it as well, okay? Because that's a big difference between renting and buying, right? So when you rent, your lease ends, you move on to the next house, no big deal, or apartment or whatever. When you buy, obviously there's some financial ties to that house. So we want to make sure it's a good investment for you, okay? So the next person you're going to be working with very heavily is going to be your mortgage officer. So your loan officer is similar in the sense that you can work with any of them. Obviously, they work for different banks. So banks will have different programs. They will have slightly different interest rates, grant programs, and stuff like that, processes. So it is important to pick a loan officer at a bank that you like, and that you feel comfortable with, and that is offering you, good programs and stuff. And honestly, you really need a mortgage loan officer who you feel comfortable asking questions to. So a lot of it's that personality click, which I don't think people realize, because this person is going to help you make a really big financial decision that you need to feel comfortable going to this person and saying, here's, because some loan officers will say, yeah, you can buy a house up to $300,000. Well, do you want to buy a house that expensive? Do you want your mortgage payment to be something that looks more like a $200,000 house? So you have to feel comfortable having those conversations and feeling comfortable asking questions over and over again. If you're not getting something, then you need to feel comfortable knowing that you can ask this person again and again until it clicks in your head, okay? It's a really important relationship. And the loan officer and the realtor, we work really closely together. We know what the other person needs for the most part. So picking, asking your realtor for lender advice, or like to pick out a lender, or asking a lender for realtor options is good too, because we do work with people a lot and we're able to give you some good recommendations on that. So the next person that you'll encounter, so that let's say that you get the house. So the home inspector. Inspections are done after you have an accepted offer on a house. Okay, so you've already negotiated the price, the dates, and all that stuff. Okay, then you get the inspections done. The home inspector is probably the only inspector you'll actually meet in person. If you do a radon inspection or a termite, you usually don't ever meet those people. You'll mail them checks and stuff, but you don't have to actually ever meet them. The home inspector will take about 2 hours, go through the house, and they're going to look at pretty much everything that they can access in the house, down to really minor things that are going to be maintenance items for you. Here's where you should caulk around your tub to prevent water from getting in there and damaging your floorboards, right? Or obviously they want to find big problems. They're going to go up into your attic and say, hey, there's a leak over here in this corner, okay? So they're going to find they're a wide range, and they're really a good general spot to start. And since we're here, I'll kind of jump over into the financial part. Home inspectors, most of them will charge on the size of the house, so it varies on square footage. But I usually average around, 350 to 400 is probably a good ballpark. And that is one of those first things that you're going to start paying for when you're under contract. Okay. So that money, does start to come out. So the home inspector will take a couple hours, look through the house, and then you and I will meet the home inspector at the house to review the report and then walk the house together again. So that's going to be like pretty much your only chance to go look at the house in between when you put an offer in and your final walkthrough and closing. Okay. But it's great because you'll have the report and the inspector there, so you can actually bring up items and say, no, what about this? And we noticed this. And you'll be able to have those conversations and you'll get this report. It can be kind of an overwhelming report, but it could be 30 to 60 pages. A lot of it's just going to be pictures and information like here was, the condition of the house at this time. Okay. It's not meant to scare you. It's really meant to be kind of a record and a tool for you to refer back to moving forward when you're working on maintenance on the house. You can kind of just go down the list of like, okay, so now I'm going to do this and now I'm going to do that. And it's ways to help you prevent problems in your home. Okay. An attorney is someone that sellers will pretty much always have an attorney. Okay. They're really cost-effective ways to order title work, to get the settlement paperwork put together, to review paperwork and all that good stuff. So a seller is pretty much always going to have an attorney. Buyers do not have to have an attorney, and technically sellers don't either. But buyers, I would say maybe 50% of the time do have attorneys. I recommend them because the sellers have them. I think it's always fair to make sure you're on equal footing with the other side. You'll get a pretty good feel when you're negotiating with people, like if they're going to be like, if the seller's going to be really like sticklers on stuff and you just kind of get that feeling like we're going to have problems later, then I'll usually say, I think you should go ahead and retain one now. And they're a flat fee attorney. So a lot of attorneys are like charged by the hour. Real estate attorneys, for the most part, are flat fee. So regardless of all the issues that come up, it's pretty much guaranteed that you're going to pay this one price at closing unless something crazy happens. And that's nice that it gets rolled into your closing figures and stuff like that. Okay. But the attorney will help review the contract on your behalf, help negotiate inspections on your behalf, and they'll be there at closing to basically walk you through what you're signing, what it means for you, and represent you if any issues come up at closing. Okay. Appraisers technically are contracted by the bank to look at the house and make sure the bank's investment in the house, like in giving you the money for this house, is a good investment, basically. So they're looking at the price, so they're making sure you're not overpaying for the house, but they're also like if it's an FHA or a VA loan, there will be certain requirements of the house as well that they're checking on. So it is like another protection for you that you get to have this person, look at the property and review it on your behalf. So if you do get into like a multiple offer situation and things are just like, they happen so quickly and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, did I overpay for the house? That appraiser is there to kind of keep things in check. Okay. So moving on to financials. So like I said, your down payment, you don't have to put 20% down. That's not a thing you have to do anymore. Obviously, we like seeing that because that means you have a really good equity built up into it. You can get out of the house pretty quickly, without having to come to money with closing and stuff like that. You can get a conventional loan, which is usually the easiest type of loan. If you qualify for that, it just, it's the smoothest process. There's not as many regulations on it. You can do a conventional loan with as little as 3% down. I don't recommend it unless you really think you're going to live in that house for, 10, 20 years, and you're going to be able to put some equity into it at that point. But you can put, 3-5% down, and you'll talk to your lender about that. FHA would require at least 3.5% down. There are tons of grant programs and stuff that lenders can put you in touch with and see if you qualify for. Most of those are income based. So even if you bought a house before, that actually has nothing to do with it, because a lot of people will call them first time homebuyer grants, but really they're just income based. So if your income qualifies for your household size, then you're good there. And that will very much depend on the time of year, what programs are available, and all that. So I can't say too much about that because that will vary a lot. And then you will have closing costs as a buyer. So, it costs money to borrow money. So you do have some fees that are going to they'll get wrapped up in the closing, which will be nice, but each bank's going to be different. So I can't totally tell you what that's going to be, but that'll be a conversation we'll have with your loan officer of like, what are my closing costs going to be? Because you do pay for that appraisal, you do pay an origination fee and title fees and all that stuff. So that will vary a little bit, but again, that all gets wrapped up into closing. Some other costs that you'll encounter, so like I said, the attorney, $300 to $400 depending on the attorney. That is, like I said, a flat fee that gets wrapped in the closing. Home inspection, that will come out right away when you do the inspection. So usually about 2 weeks while you're under contract is when that will happen, and you'll pay them at the time of service. The radon test, same thing. You'll do that basically at the time of the test. If you're not familiar with radon is a gas that comes through the ground. And it's been suggested that basically there's these regulations in place that I don't want to get too much into radon, but there's a way to do a test for it to basically make sure that it meets what is currently considered our standard of like safe levels of gas to have in the house. So that's a really cheap test to do, considering getting as a seller, when you get on the hook for paying for it, the cost of mitigation could be $700 to $1,000 or more, depending on the house and if it's got 5 crawl spaces or whatever. So trust me, it's a really good, cost-effective inspection that, from a resale perspective, will be worth it. Your termite test, so that gets done closer to closing, so it doesn't fall into your normal inspections because we want to check for termites closer to closing. If we did it, day one under contract and you still have 40 days to go, well, termites could come in later and start chewing on the house. So we don't want that. And that's a really cheap test too. Some lenders will require it. Most do not these days, but it's always recommended. I would say I have maybe, one house a year that comes back with termite damage. So you want to check it out. And then we can do additional inspections. So chimney inspection, we can do stuff like that. An electric, you don't have to do a home inspection. So if you're only worried about a certain type of thing, you can just do a chimney inspection or just do, electric or HVAC inspection or something like that. So we'll cater that to you once we pick out the house. So the process in general is there's 2 kind of entry points that people start. Either they start with a realtor and do something like a buyer consultation, or they start with a lender to get pre-approved and figure out. But either way, whichever one you start with, we're going to then pass you to the other, so then you can figure out the other side of that. Because your lender is really going to provide the roadmap for us. Because I've had people that they have no idea what they would qualify for. And so we're looking at houses between like $90,000 and $160,000, and we have no idea. So pretty much right away, we want to get you in touch with a lender so we can narrow that down, because if you can only afford up to $150,000 and you're looking at $170,000 houses, that's really not fun, because you're going to fall in love with something, because of course it's going to be really nice, and then you're not going to be able to afford it and you're going to be super disappointed. So realtors will always pass you right over to that lender so we can get that roadmap and figure out where you're comfortable. Once we pick out the house, then we will write the offer, which we'll talk about in part 2. And basically we can negotiate everything. So we negotiate price, if you need any closing cost credit, the closing date itself, the inspection deadlines, a home warranty. There's lots of things that we can kind of fill in and negotiate along the way. So part of my job is to figure out what's important to you. And in any negotiation, you give to get. So there might be things we give up on to get it, that's more important to you, so that's what we're here to kind of help you along and figure out what matters to get you the best terms and price possible. So then you're under contract, and some people call it escrow and that kind of stuff. So you might hear different words, but basically you're going to be under contract. I would say an average is probably 45 days. There are some lenders that can get it done under 30 days. There's some lenders and loans that I'm like, I get nervous for even 60 days. Beyond 60 days is kind of excessive. Most people kind of want to move on, but you will see every once in a while that. So when you're trying to time out when your rent is due, like when your lease is up and stuff, we'll want to work backwards from that so we can give you some time on that. But yeah, there are lenders that can close sooner. But I would say for now, as a general kind of, plotting point, let's start with 45 days. And then closing day. So we will do the final walkthrough of the house to make sure that the house is in the same condition that it was before. Nothing, was broken or smashed or, damaged when people were moving out. Then we sit down at the closing table. There's a bunch of people around it. You'll sign a bunch of paperwork and you'll get the keys to the house and you can immediately start doing anything you want with it. So that's kind of the general starting point of the buyer consultation. In the next part of the video, we will get specifically into the McLean County contract and I'll explain to you the different parts and what's important in that.